The night was heavy with the scent of salt and pine as the Viking ship cut through the black waters of the northern sea. Its dragon-headed prow gliding like a silent predator beneath the pale ghost of the moon. The crew whispered of strange omens seen in the sky, of a flickering blue light that darted across the stars like a restless spirit. And the seeress in the stern spoke of a creature not born of Midgard, nor any realm the Skalds had sung of before. The Viking, known among his people as Eric the Iron-Handed, gripped his axe and gazed toward the horizon where the light had last been seen. He was a warrior of countless raids, his beard stiff with the memory of winter storms, his eyes carrying the reflection of 100 battles. Yet never had he faced an enemy whose song was said to rattle the bones of sailors and drive wolves from the forests. The villagers called it by many names: Spirit Frog, Thunder Toad, the Blue Jester. But one name had stuck in the tongues of traders and drunks alike: Crazy Frog. It was said to ride the winds on a tiny, invisible machine that screamed like a demon's horn, its laugh echoing across valleys, its speed unmatched by arrow or spear. For weeks the creature had plagued the northern coast, stealing trinkets, toppling barrels of mead, waking children with its eerie melody, and vanishing before any could lay steel upon it. Eric had sworn an oath upon his father's grave that he would hunt the blue demon and bring its head to the Jarl, not for gold, but for honor. For a warrior's name was worth more than silver when sung by the fireside. As dawn broke, the ship reached the shore of an isle cloaked in mist and ancient pine. The air was thick, humming faintly, as though the world itself awaited the clash of two forces that should never have met. Eirik stepped onto the cold stones, his boots sinking into moss older than the sagas, his shield strapped across his back, his breath rising like smoke. He felt eyes upon him, though none were there, heard a faint buzzing in the wind that teased the edges of madness. Deeper into the forest he went, past runestones carved with warnings no one now could read, until the trees opened into a clearing where the grass was pressed flat in circles. And in the middle, atop a boulder, there sat the thing he had come to find. It was smaller than the tales had painted it, a slick blue creature with bulging eyes, and a grin that split its face from ear to ear, wearing nothing but a helmet too large for its head and goggles that glinted in the morning light. Its legs twitched with a restless energy, its throat pulsed like a drum, and in its webbed fingers it held nothing at all, yet the air around it shimmered with the promise of motion. Eirik narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening on the axe haft. The frog turned its gaze toward him, and for a heartbeat there was silence. Then came the sound, a strange, manic chattering, part croak, part mechanical whine, that sent birds screaming from the trees. The Viking lowered his stance, unsure if the thing mocked him or summoned some unseen power. "So," he growled, his voice rough as gravel, "you are the one who wakes the children, who steals the peace of these shores." The frog tilted its head, its grin widening, and in a blur it leapt, not toward him, but around him, a circle of blue and sound, faster than a hawk's dive. Eric turned, his axe flashing, but struck only empty air as the creature zipped past, its strange song rising into a maddening rhythm. The forest bent with the force of its passage, pine needles swirling like a winter gale. For a moment, the Viking felt the weight of the world shift, as though the ground itself no longer obeyed the laws of men. He swung again, sparks flying from stone, and the frog landed upon a fallen log a dozen paces away, wiggling its fingers in a gesture that was neither threat nor greeting, but something in between. Eric steadied his breath, realizing brute force would not catch this spirit. He had hunted wolves across the fjords, had stalked bears through snowfields, where even the sun dared not linger. Yet never had his prey sung to him, while dancing just beyond his reach. The creature tapped its throat, let out a noise like a broken horn, and vanished into the trees, leaving only the scent of ozone and the echo of its laugh. The Viking gave chase, his boots pounding the frost-hardened ground, the mist swallowing his breath as the forest closed once more behind him. The forest grew darker as the mists thickened, coiling like pale serpents around the ancient trunks, while the echoes of the creature's strange song bounced from stone to stone, always a step ahead of the Viking's rage. Eric the Iron-Handed pressed onward, his breath forming clouds that clung to his beard, his eyes scanning the shifting light for the flash of unnatural blue. Suddenly the air changed, colder and thinner, and a clearing opened where a stream cut through the roots, its waters running with a faint glow as if moonlight had sunk beneath it. There, on a crooked stump, the frog appeared again, its wide eyes gleaming with mischief. The sound came once more, that warbling tone that was neither fully a croak nor fully a horn, and with it a vibration in the ground that made the pebbles dance. Eric raised his axe, his voice carrying across the clearing like a war horn. "Stand and face me, spirit. If you are beast, I will skin you. If you are ghost, I will bind you with runes. If you are a god, then fight as one." The frog tilted its head, blinked slowly, and in a blur of motion it sprang forward, not to flee, but to strike. Its leap was a streak of azure light, its limbs coiled like springs of iron, and before the Viking could bring his blade down, the creature had struck his chest with a force that sent him stumbling back against a tree. The sound it made as it struck was a jarring mix of croak and metallic ring, as though a drum had cracked beneath the heavens. Eric spat blood, roared, and swung in a broad arc. The axe bit into the earth, missing the frog by a hair's width as it flipped over his shoulder, its mad song rising like a storm wind. Trees bent under the sound wave, leaves trembling loose though winter still held the land. The Viking turned, his back aching, and saw the frog circle him, its speed unnatural, its small body leaving after images of blue in the air. It was toying with him, like a wolf dances around a boar before the kill. Eric growled, dropped to one knee, and drew a dagger from his belt, whispering the runes of snare his grandmother had taught him. The blade glowed faintly, a line of old power, and he hurled it at the ground where the frog's shadow passed. For a heartbeat, the creature faltered, its rhythm breaking, the strange hum in the air stuttering like a broken pipe. Eric lunged, catching its slick body in a glancing blow that tore the leather strap of its absurd helmet. The frog shrieked, a sound like shattering glass, and tumbled across the moss. But it rose again, faster, furious now, its eyes flaring with a neon light that no forge had ever known. It opened its mouth, and a pulse of sound burst forth, knocking the Viking from his feet. His axe skidded across the stones. His ears rang as if 1,000 horns had been blown at once, and the frog darted past him, leaving a trail of scorched grass. The forest trembled with their clash. Birds fled, and the ancient rune stones began to hum, awakened by the chaos. Eric pushed himself up, his chest bruised, his thoughts swirling like snow in a gale. This was no ordinary foe. It was not merely fast. It bent the air. It sang the ground into motion. It fought with madness as a blade. Yet his blood boiled with the thrill of it. Here was a battle worthy of saga, a foe to test the iron in his soul. He picked up his axe, planted his feet, and shouted into the trees, "You will not dance forever, Blue Devil. The hunt is over. Now begins the war." From the shadows came a faint chuckle, a bubbling laugh, and then the sound again, louder, closer, as the frog's strange machine whirred into life, a blur of lights and sound circling him like a storm about to break. The storm of sound faded into a low hum as the frog slowed its mad circling, testing the Viking's resolve with sudden dashes that ended just beyond the reach of the axe blade. Each feint followed by a mocking flick of its long tongue or a twitch of its legs that scattered dirt into his eyes. Eric knew now that to chase blindly was to fall into the trap the creature wove. For its strength was not in weight or claw, but in the endless dance of motion and sound that wore down the patience of men. He lowered his stance, his boots biting into the frozen earth, and let the silence stretch, his breath steady, the ache in his ribs a reminder of the first blow. The frog hopped lightly onto a low branch, its wide eyes blinking in the dim light, and for the first time it seemed to hesitate, studying him as a fox studies a trap. Irik's fingers flexed upon the haft of his axe, his other hand brushing the knife at his belt, and he began to move not toward the frog, but sideways, forcing it to shift its perch. The creature clicked its throat, a small sound like a snapped twig, and leapt again. But this time, the Viking did not swing. He ducked, let it sail past, then turned and slammed his shoulder into a tree, shaking loose a cascade of snow that blinded the path behind him. A shriek cut through the air as the frog misjudged its landing, skidding across the slick roots, and Eric lunged, bringing the blunt side of his axe down upon the ground to trap its spindly legs. The blow missed by a hand's breadth, splitting bark instead, but the frog stumbled, its mad rhythm broken. They circled again, slower now, both breathing heavier, the forest holding its breath as frost began to creep along the stones where their steps had passed. The Viking's arm ached, his fingers numb, but his mind cleared, every heartbeat a drum of focus. He tossed a small pouch from his belt into the snow to his left, letting the powder of dried moss and salt scatter in the wind, a scent the creature's twitching nose could not ignore. The frog turned its head for a fraction of a moment, enough for Eric to rush forward, swinging low, the axe grazing the edge of its helmet, sending it spinning into the underbrush. A spark of frustration lit the frog's bulging eyes, its grin no longer so wide, and it darted backward, croaking in a tone that cracked the ice upon the stream, but no longer sent the trees shaking. It was tiring, too, its leaps shorter, its speed faltering where the ground rose. Eric pressed the advantage, hurling a stone to the right to draw its gaze, then stepping left, with the patience of a hunter who has tracked elk for days. His breath rasped, his chest burned, yet the thrill of the chase turned his fatigue into iron. The frog tried another sudden charge, its limbs blurring, but this time he caught it with the rim of his shield, a dull thud sending it sprawling into the snow. Before he could pin it, it rolled, a streak of blue vanishing between the roots, leaving a trail of disturbed frost. Eric snarled, planted his axe in the ground, and listened. No more songs, no more humming engines, only the whisper of pine needles and the slow drip of thawing ice. He wiped the sweat from his brow, tasting blood where his lip had split, and knew this battle would not end in a single clash. It would be a war of patience, of trick and counter-trick, of two creatures born for motion, forced to test the edges of their endurance. Somewhere in the shadows, the frog croaked once, not with joy, but with something colder, and the echo lingered like a promise. The night thickened around the clearing as the last traces of twilight sank behind the pines, leaving only the cold gleam of the stars upon the snow, where footprints told the story of predator and prey, though it was no longer clear which was which. Eric the Iron-Handed crouched near the stream, his breath ragged, the haft of his axe slick with frost and sweat, his shoulder bruised from the countless feints and strikes that had led them here. The frog's song had faded to a hoarse whisper, its once maddening rhythm now broken by the weight of exhaustion, and from the shadows came a faint, uneven croak that trembled rather than mocked. Both were weary, both bled, one from claw and sound, the other from iron and will, and the forest seemed to lean closer, as though the ancient pines hungered for the end. Eric rose slowly, his boots sinking in the slush where the stream had begun to thaw, and called out, his voice low, "Enough dancing, Blue Devil. Come face me, and let the gods decide." There was a rustle, a flicker of movement, and then the frog emerged, its helmet gone, its goggles cracked, its skin marred with cuts that oozed faintly in the moonlight. Its bulging eyes no longer gleamed with mockery, but with a thin thread of defiance that even fatigue could not wash away. It crouched, limbs trembling, the strange hum of its unseen machine sputtering like dying embers. For a heartbeat, neither moved, their breaths mingling in the frozen air, two creatures caught between instinct and something that felt like grim respect. Then the frog sprang, not with the blinding speed of before, but with a desperate lunge that carried the weight of its survival. Eric met it head-on, his axe sweeping upward, the blade catching the creature's side in a spray of frost and blood. The frog shrieked, its long limbs flailing, and in that instant its body collided with his chest, the force knocking them both into the stream. Ice cracked, water hissed, and the cold bit deeper than any blade. They struggled, man and beast entangled, the current dragging them toward a cluster of jagged stones. Eric gritted his teeth, his hand closing around the frog's slick arm, and with a roar he drove the axe downward, pinning it to the riverbed. The frog let out one last, broken note, a sound that echoed across the trees like a dying horn, and its body convulsed, the strange light in its throat flickering out. But in its death throes, its legs struck the Viking's side, the force snapping the strap of his armor and driving him against the sharp rock. Pain lanced through his ribs, the cold rushing into the wound like a thief. He pulled the axe free, staggered to the shore with the creature limp in his grasp, and collapsed upon the stones. The stars wheeled above, indifferent and endless. The forest was silent now, the mad song gone, the pines no longer trembling. Eric looked at the still form beside him, the absurd grin frozen upon its face even in death, and he felt no triumph, only the heavy weight of a saga that would not be sung with laughter. His breath grew shallow, each one a knife, the wound in his side darkening the snow. He thought of the sea, of the hearth he would not see again, and let his head fall back. The last thing he heard was the faint gurgle of the stream carrying both their stories away. By dawn, the clearing held only the prints of a struggle and the quiet hush of new snow, covering man and frog alike in the same cold shroud.